Hi, everyone. It's the show with Ron, and today is the beginning of the U.S. primaries. And if you're watching the news, you'll probably see all this stuff on there. It's just all caucus, caucus, Iowa, Iowa. Blanket coverage from the media with very little explanation as to what's really going on, what's the significance, who cares about Iowa, should we care about Iowa? So I thought I'd get on real quick and give a little background and context. What we know is we have the Iowa caucuses today. It's the first part of the U.S. primaries, the primaries being the pre-elections where each of the political parties gets to whittle down the masses of people who are running under their party banner until it's just one left, and they can concentrate all their attention on that person as their nominee for the general election in November. So this first one is January 15th. It's in Iowa, and it's called a caucus. It's essentially all part of the primaries, but the caucus is a different kind of election. If a state holds a primary election, the government pays for it, and it's a traditional voting, like you go into a little balloting machine, and the curtain closes behind you, that sort of thing, and you have absentee ballots, etc. Caucuses are funded by each political party in a state. So say the Republicans and Democrats, they will have hired out halls, church basements, just big open spaces all over Iowa. And in each of these, people can come. You got to come in person. There's no absentee ballots. You come there in person, and each of the candidates will have a person appointed at each of these polling stations, not really polling stations, but the caucus room that they've hired, and they will give a short speech, and then everybody votes. They take the vote and they put it in the box. So as you could tell, the caucus thing sounds like a very old-fashioned way of doing things, and it is. And more states used to use caucuses, now more use primaries. So, and I know a lot of people, maybe most countries in the world, a lot of European countries, perhaps they have a much more centralized system where they have very uniform laws over their country. But in the United States, each state is like its own little country. You know, even what we name the police in each state is different. The names of the infractions of the laws, the rules of the roads, whether you can turn on right or not, all these sort of rules, they're different. Each state does its own thing. And they do the same thing with the primaries. It's different per state. States can vote to change the date of when their primary is on. Although states like Iowa and New Hampshire, the first two states, they very jealously guard their position as the first states in the primary process, because that gives them a lot of attention. It gives them a lot of importance. When you get several months from now, the nominee will probably be certain by then, and the media will not even cover a lot of the states' primaries at all. They'll just be mentioned in passing, if at all. So the states do crave that access to the media vis-a-vis their early polling. And so this was just the very first question. I had a question from a viewer who just was, saying, like, why do we have to care about the Iowa caucus? Why is it mentioned? It's just mentioned as if it's a thing. And really, in several of the past caucuses, I think 2008, I think 2012 and 16, the people who won it in the opposition did not end up being the nominee. So the Iowa caucus is not always seen as a barometer, a bellwether of who's going to win. However, the entire early primary process is key for a candidate to kind of develop the momentum. it's not easy to say you lose all the early primaries and then somehow when the other states start to vote, you'll pick it up. No, you'll have already lost the momentum. You'll be seen as the only candidate. So candidates going very hard for these early primary wins. Now, this year, even though, like I say, in recent years, Iowa has not been a bellwether success for the eventual nominee. This year we have, a situation particularly in Trump where the Republican Party, I've talked about the cigar chomping backroom guys smoking on their cigars, and they are that's an allusion to 19th century politics where the president was and the vice president was chosen in the back room, in the smoke-filled rooms by the bigwigs, the people who kind of knew best, maybe they did know best, and who would be the best person to be the nominee. And it seems to me, my feeling was that in the past 4 or 5 months, there's been an effort to try to see if the Republican Party can get another person in there, DeSantis, Haley, maybe somebody else, to be someone who's not as chaotic, who's not as controversial as Trump as a Republican nominee. And we've seen many stories being floated up until just last week about, oh, wow, Nikki Haley is showing surprising strength and she's a real challenger. Although in the polls, none of those other candidates ever came close to touching Trump's support. And right now, let's see, I think there is something about the last polls. The last polls we had before the election is starting, which is now, I believe, as I'm recording this, Trump was leading with 48% of the vote, followed by Haley with 20 and DeSantis with 16. So all that stuff over the past few months where somebody else was gaining on Trump, it doesn't seem to have worked out at all. Very early on, we had even the governor of Iowa who came out to endorse DeSantis. And that is, at that time, DeSantis was already, his campaign had kind of failed, but that was obviously an attempt to give a boost to somebody who might come up and give knock Trump out of the leading position. Another question that came up here was about, what about Trump and addressing the crowds? Could somebody like Trump really have popularity or support? Who would actually vote for him? I think that's really what's behind it, because there's so many negative things said about Trump, probably justifiably, that maybe someone from a non-U.S. aspect looking at this would have to say, well, is he really popular? Maybe I believe this stuff that says Haley is gaining in Iowa. And it also probably has to do with, remember when Trump's inauguration, the claim that Trump claimed there were 1 million or 1.5 million people at the inauguration. And then when they proved that couldn't be the case, he doubled down on it. Very strange behavior for a traditional politician, but that's not what Trump was. He's a blustery blowhard, and he brags and he doesn't back down on it. It's a very strange difference in the politician that compared to the very careful and deferential politicians of the past. So I tried to read a lot about what the crowd sizes were for Trump. Trump's been in court. He hasn't done debates. They've had some rallies, and I've seen people say the crowds are small and or disappointing. But I would also put that down to, again, the media would always discount Trump. They would always say he's a fool who doesn't have a chance. And they would always say, and even as I say, the Republican, the cigar chomping backroom guys would say that that might float things to discount Trump's supposed popularity in favor of other candidates. So it's not clear if crowd size is a factor here. And in Iowa, as we see, it's a depth of winter in the United States anyway. So unless he's doing big rallies inside or something, there's not going to be the crowds. I would suspect with the lead he's always had in Iowa, he's going to try to get on top on that and proceed forward to try to knock out Nikki Haley, who is, again, the media is saying is looking strong in the next primary in New Hampshire on the 23rd. But we'll see. There's a lot to happen before things unwind, even to later this month. Another question: who would be Trump's vice president, and when would he announce that? Trump has already said he has a person in mind. Who knows who it is, or the idea, the background behind it is the president or the person, the nominee can appoint that person anytime. They're appointed. It could be before the convention in July. I remember years ago when I got an absentee ballot overseas, and it had John McCain on it. And at that time, he had not announced his VP pick, so it was blank. So you see, even the ballots can go out, the absentee ballots can go out without the vice president on it at that time. And usually the vice president pick would be announced to have a big boost in the media, because then that whole week afterwards, they're looking into the VP and having interviews with him and looking at his past and, seeing if they balance out the ticket, with maybe coming from a state with a lot of electoral votes, this sort of thing. So you do it. You could also do it to take the focus off of your opponent. You could do it right before the convention to add a big boost of excitement. So it's a strategic decision. Another question, Biden. Now he's going through the primary process just as Trump is. So the question is, Biden, who will be his VP? And I was asked, surely he will not be considering going with Kamala Harris again. And first, the U.S. system may be unlike a lot of systems, if you're not American, that you're familiar with. A lot of countries use the ministers of parliament system, where you have these governments that are cobbled together of multi-parties and the portfolios in all the different areas, and the deputy MPs that are made up of different party leaders, this sort of thing. And those can be shifted around all the time. And a guy can be MP or prime minister and then come back and again and again. It's all interchangeable. In U.S. political system, see, if Biden were to shift away from Kamala Harris now, he would be renounced and ridiculed as choosing the wrong person for the job. Now, I would say really since the end of World War II, the position of vice president has become more important. Maybe before that, they did switch sometimes, and FDR had several different guys as his VP, and all the way back in the 19th century, a lot of the VPs didn't reside in Washington, D.C. They just lived at home in case they were ever needed. It was a slower world. But, after World War II, we had the bomb. And so it was important to have a continuity of leadership that was, ready at any moment. So that's when the VP became more important. So if that diminished a little bit with the end of the Cold War, but with all the wars and the rumors of wars of the 21st century, if Biden were to switch out, that would be an unprecedented thing that hasn't happened since. It would be since the FDR's time, where the vice president was just a sort of a political plum that somebody got to pluck during their time to be the vice president. Every person after that, Truman onward, was a more significant person. So it wouldn't be easy to switch out the person like you're changing the portfolios and the minister of parliament. Plus, since Kamala Harris is already in that position, there's a big cadre of political people, business leaders, bankers, people who are counting on her moving up into that position. So you'd have a lot of screaming and shouting to not allow to say it was unjust to get rid of her. And after all, she was in there not because they looked at everybody and chose the right person. When Biden was running, he pledged that his vice presidential pick would be a female, would be a woman only. So he limited himself. And then there was the choosing. So he wasn't able to choose everybody. He only had to choose the females. And then on top of that, see, you want to choose somebody that balances out the ticket. So like you choose somebody from Texas, you choose somebody from California because they have a lot of electoral votes. And you know, if somebody on the presidential ticket is from your state, you might vote for them. So you want them to carry those regions. Or if you're a northerner or a southerner, you want to pick a person that's from the opposite area that balances you out. Or if you're a foreign policy guy, you want to pick a more state economics person. Just it's a balancing the ticket. So it would be tricky. It was tricky enough to find Kamala Harris. And, you know, of course, the reason I think maybe some Americans might say, well, I haven't heard anything about her in a while. But, you know, outside of the U.S. media bubble, and if you went back a couple years in the U.S. media, you would see there was a lot of talk about Kamala Harris and the kind of strange way she speaks, not very good at ad-libbing, very odd word salad of words, not able to speak extemporaneously, not really seeming to be serious enough all the time when she's speaking to crowds. And then there were a couple years ago a whole flurry of articles about her, like her chief of staff and the high turnover because she's supposedly very difficult to work with. And it was even floated back a little bit ago when California needed a new senator. The senator had died, and it was the president was in a position to select someone to be in that spot until the next election. That it could be a face-saving way for Kamala Harris to opt out of the vice president position and be put into the senator of California. Then Biden would have a free rein to get a new person in there. However, even then he's probably constrained because people would demand, the activist would demand, it must be a female. None of those men in there to keep up that kind of quota system. So why even the focus on Kamala Harris, where often vice presidents are just, the candidates are relegated to the background in a lot of circumstances, is because obviously, and I'm sure the Republicans are going to make an issue of this, is they're going to say, you're not voting for Biden, you're voting for Kamala Harris, because you've seen the way Biden speaks and conducts himself. Even if the media is sort of keeping that on the down low of not emphasizing his apparent senility when speaking, people can see those clips and they watch those clips, and there's probably going to be some fake AI clips too, but there doesn't need to be because there's plenty that show him seeming scarily daughterly or dotty in the way he speaks. So who knows? You know, it would be awful if Biden, you know, it's a chance that maybe he would not make it into the election, not next November. And if you're in a big battle with a giant resurgent Trump who has grasped the nomination 6 months from now, and suddenly Biden is incapacitated and you have Trump up against Kamala Harris, as you know, Trump seems crazy and Kamala Harris seems like a lightweight in terms of political gravity. So that's, you know, at the same time that the cigar chomping, smoke-filled room guys in the Republican Party were trying to replace Trump, we did see a little bit of people floating ideas about, What do we do about this Biden situation? Are we ready to go full force with him, considering all that can possibly happen? So those are some questions I hope I've answered about the context of what's going on at the beginning of this exciting, thrilling, sort of ominous primary season. We're going to have another election between Trump and Biden. Apparently, we'll see. The election, the first votes haven't been counted yet, so we'll see what happens. I'll come back tomorrow. You'll see the news. So here we have. So the first one is today, this day, January 15th. This is the caucus for the Republicans. And then the next is a presidential primary in New Hampshire on the 23rd. The other interesting thing is that the Democrats have... the Iowa caucus has been split this year. So we have the Democrats are going to be voting later on. Where is this? They're going to be voting on Super Tuesday on the 5th. Again, this is some kind of a deal to make another state be the first state for the Democrats to vote. This kind of underlines the idea where the parties in the primary process are in control of this. This isn't like constitutionally mandated national elections. This is all stuff that's held at the party's behest at the local levels at the state. So I think that's about it. You know, when you start to look into these primary things, the more you look, the more interesting old little trivia there is, because all these states do it differently, and it's very baroque, it's very complicated, and it's very quirky. It's like old time America. And so I did peek at this card just now. This is our Art of War card we look at every day, and today the one says, apropos enough, defeat your adversary's plans. Okay? Deny your adversary the opportunity to show what he can do. The best your adversary can do means little if he cannot execute his plans. We have to see how we can apply these to a business, our lives. And I guess this is sort of what's being applied all throughout politics now in the United States. In the articles that are being written in the press, the dirty tricks of the parties against each other. It's all a part of the political system, I guess, since the beginning of time. It's a terrible, imperfect system, but probably the best one that terrible, imperfect humans can think up. So that's today. We'll come back with some results from the Iowa caucuses tomorrow, and we'll see how this thing turns out. And hopefully I'll be with you all through the election this year and up until the new president. So goodbye until next time.